When I was around 6 years old, I went to see Monster House at the cinema with my mother and some friends, and I remember spending the following week unable to sleep at night because I kept having dreams about this guy, Nebbercracker. But what was most unsettling was that it wasn't the Disney witches from Salem or the ghost of the Nightmare Before Christmas. It was just an old man. The thing is, after studying film for a few years, I was able to explain why Monster House is so disturbing. In fact, it's quite evident why it is. The inexplicable turned into how they allowed this to happen in movie theaters for children. So to help you understand what I mean, let me refresh your memory a bit. The movie revolves around DJ and Chowder, two prepubescent kids experiencing one of their last Halloweens before they hit puberty. And essentially, the joke is that they share a block with the creepy, deteriorated house across the street. There's something intriguing about this premise right from the start because it stems from something very real. We've all had at some point in our neighborhoods, unless you were a wealthy kid, a semi-abandoned or severely deteriorated house that stood out from the rest of the houses on the block. It's that uncomfortable presence that raises questions, and sometimes comes with a character we've likely all encountered, the typical crazy old man. It's almost a stereotype, a myth that everyone probably speculates about, weaves stories around, and indeed in the movie they do it more than once.
Besides, everybody knows what he did to his wife.
Why? What did he do to her?
He ate her!
The concept of tapping into reality, delving into the genuine fears and anxieties of a child will thread its way through the entire film. And in my perspective, it's one of the elements that truly enhances its potential. You see, both the house and the elderly man serve as a jarring contrast to the harmony of the surrounding homes, a dissonance that becomes evident from the very start. To illustrate my point further, I'd like to focus on the film's introduction scene. The opening sequence kicks off with a random girl playing on her tricycle, until suddenly its wheel gets stuck on the grass of a decrepit house. As soon as the wheel jams, following the girl's futile attempts to free it, we're introduced to Nebbercracker.
Get off my lawn!
Obviously, the visual construction of this specific moment is disturbing. That's evident, and we won't even dwell on that. However, I believe it's essential to highlight the character design. All of them, including this man and the rest of the cast, are based on Chris Applehagen's conceptual art, which shows a clear intention to achieve designs that are unpolished, highly disproportionate, and unrealistic. In any case, once transformed into virtual sculptures, their life is breathed into them by the actors, a cast that includes heavyweights like Steve Buscemi and Maggie Gyllenhaal as the babysitter, a technology that was revolutionary by 2005 and wasn't sufficiently developed, but undoubtedly adds a certain humanity to these virtual beings. But let's continue.
Oh, trespasser! Do you want to be eaten alive?
Nebbercracker introduces the primary thread of the film with the first lines of dialogue. And to cap off the scene, he shatters the girl's tricycle and keeps it for himself in his house. As he departs, we see him leaving through some very tight and peculiar shots. At first we don't understand where they're coming from, what they signify, until a few seconds pass and we discover their purpose. This initial interaction serves to establish something that will be crucial for the terror in this film. The point of view, or as we call it here, the POV. In this case, the point of view is DJ's. The entire sequence has been viewed from his perspective, and in just a few minutes, the action tells us that his parents are traveling elsewhere.
We're gonna be late!
Yeah, Mom, I'm coming.
Creating a certain tension because DJ is left home alone.
October 30th. Another tricycle. I'm coming!
We also understand that he's been investigating the old man for quite some time. The absence of his parents and the presence of this hostile figure, combined, create the perfect breeding ground for a threatening situation for DJ.
Mom, he did it again. He took another tricycle.
The danger becomes palpable from the very beginning, with not so subtle hints like DJ's mother telling him that if anything happens, he should not hesitate to dial 911.
If anything happens, call the police and hide in your closet.
He knows that.
See you tomorrow night!
Or even a child being hit by a car. These are subtleties, but they contribute to the terrifying atmosphere, especially with these unexpected mini scares that the movie employs consistently to jolt and keep you on edge. Anyway, Chowder makes an appearance and talks to DJ about how their voices are changing and other prepubescent matters.
Maybe I'm getting too grown up.
It's not the main focus, but gradually, the film sprinkles uncomfortable situations from pre-adolescence, which also adds to the overall atmosphere. This kind of details generate a certain sense of discomfort, just like the lingering presence of nebbercracker, or later on, the godforsaken babysitter, that instead of being an ally in this critical situation, turns into an enemy who brings her rock star looking boyfriend, who seems like he's experimented with some really bad stuff. Seriously, I've rarely seen a 3D design that repulsed me as much as this hideous man. Now, getting back to the scene, it's at this moment that the brilliance of this film comes into play. Remember that from the very beginning of the movie, all of this continues to unfold in real time. We're now 7 minutes into uninterrupted action, which is quite unusual to see, especially in films of this genre. Chowder starts playing with the ball and the camera moves around. The camera's rotating movement generates expectation, and the ball's bounce on the ground starts building up a sense of anxiety. We become engrossed in this moment until...
Are you okay? Where's my ball?
We reach the first significant point of interest and conflict in the story. They need to retrieve the ball. It's a common childhood challenge that anyone who played in their neighborhood could relate to.
I ran 10 yards and asked my mom for $1 26 times.
Once again, the film reinforces something vital, the point of view, with another DJ's subjective perspective. This aspect is revisited throughout the conversation, and we see things through his eyes. They are literally subjective shots, as the camera is where his eyes would be.
Alright, I'll do it. I'll never forget this.
Naturally, tension builds, especially since we've previously seen nebbercracker violently steal a tricycle. Then comes the dreaded and highly anticipated entrance of this man into the situation. DJ is in trouble. A brief chase ensues until the pivotal moment arrives.
Why can't you respect that? Why can't you just stay away from her?
At this point, the significance of the point of view becomes clear. DJ's subjective perspective places us in his shoes. With the decaying body of the crazy old man whose heart has just stopped inches away from us, we see the body fall right onto us. Only at this point, after 10.5 minutes into the movie, does time finally skip forward, creating a compelling introduction. We start with DJ observing nebbercracker, have 10 minutes of continuous real-time action in the middle, and close with DJ watching nebbercracker fall dead on top of him. Before the final cut, we get the film's first direct paranormal hint. The house's doors closing. Now, why do I find this brilliant? Because it essentially takes something common, the presence of a disturbed individual in the neighborhood, an old crazy man, extrapolates it into the realm of the esoteric, hypothesis, fantasy, and superstition, and then jarringly brings us back to the earthly world with perhaps one of the worst things that could happen to a child. The fantasy surrounding the house briefly takes a back seat because this is a harsh dose of reality for DJ, which is even more real for us, the viewers, as we see it through DJ's eyes all along. This is something the movie will continue to do throughout, placing us in DJ's shoes with subjective shots that return us to his childlike perspective, even in terms of camera height and erratic movement.
Happy Halloween, doofus!
Special attention is given to ensuring that the camera movement in these shots isn't perfect, unlike the typical computer-generated camera movements in animation. The medium's characteristic perfection is actively avoided in favor of something less robotic, less clean, more human. Now, I have to admit that I'm being a bit deceptive when I say this is the moment that haunted my childhood the most, because I believe it's what happens afterward when nebbercracker returns. Not from the dead, but from the hospital.
What do you know? You don't know anything.
He essentially tells us his backstory, recounting the origins of the house.
I love her so much.
It's unsettling to know that the house is, in fact, the spirit of a woman who was once confined and tortured. It's a typical horror tale that's particularly unsettling because it's about a disturbed character, a victim turned into an aggressor. But what's even more disturbing is what this means for nebbercracker, because it becomes clear that he is the one that suffers the most from this house. It's a clever way to unravel the archetype of the crazy, grumpy old man in the neighborhood, who wasn't always crazy and grumpy old man. Actually, he's a man going through grief, an eternal grief, and his madness isn't so incomprehensible. It's even reasonable. That's what's truly disturbing at the end of the day, the human factor.
I know that you've been protecting us all these years, but now it's our turn to protect you. Let her go.
Understanding that this demented old man is more than just a rundown facade, that's probably what gave me nightmares when I was 6. Aside from all the esoteric fantasy, that unsettling slice of reality, because it's clear that haunted houses don't exist, and I knew that when I watched the movie and when I couldn't sleep. But crazy old men, they're in every neighborhood, each one with their painful story.